Okay, wait, you fucking madman. This would be amazing. Spoilers for Elbath. Skedaddle. When you really think about it, Kobe is essentially the second protagonist of this story, right? He just hasn't done anything. But if this happened, Kobe would shoot up to top 3 characters ever. Look, I know Kobe loves the Marines, and Garp's motive to stay in the Marines was to train more Garps, which means strong, kind-hearted, and loyal to the Marines. Kobe is all of those things, and he will be the future of the Marines, and it will be glorious. But imagine for a fleeting moment, Kobe the Fist of the Revolution. I mean, come on! Let me set the scene. Let's say Kobe is deployed to the Hoyland to fight side by side with Akainu along with the remaining Vice Admirals, all to save the Celestial Dragons from the Revolutionaries. And he sees, I don't know, Akainu is on a burning rampage and chasing around Sabo, saying shit like, "I'll kill the man who took on the mantle of Roger's son. I will end this revolution if I have to strangle it with my own hands." And in the crossfire, Akainu is burning slaves and Marines by the dozen. Fists of magma rain down and maim men, women, and children as the Vices are just ushering the nobles to safety. And Kobe hears everything. Screams, voices disappearing, the smell of burnt flesh, a child's cry. Akainu closes in on Sabo. Magma is going to smother fire again. And as he reaches for Luffy's last brother, a hockey-covered left hook crushes his jaw. Akainu goes flying, Kobe shakes his hand, there's smoke on his knuckles. Honesty punch. And then Kobe, just like Dragon that day at God Valley, resigns on the spot and starts freeing slaves. Starting with those poor fuckers that move the floor. That shit is crazy. They can definitely automate that. Oh, they killed Vegapunk. And then Kobe becomes a man who can no longer separate the good that the Marines do from the evil that they let happen. And he starts a new journey. And then through the final saga, we get these parallel arcs, where Luffy and Kobe are both working towards the liberation of the One Piece world, but one through the pirate lens and one through the revolutionaries. Retroactively making that scene where Dragon watched Roger's execution one of the most important moments in the entire story, because it's no longer just about Luffy, but a precursor to both protagonists. I mean, this is all at this point fan fiction, but sick as hell, right? But returning to the themes of this story. Yeah, revolutionary Kobe would be generational, but it definitely isn't going to happen. I am curious though, in the grand scheme of things, I wonder what Kobe thinks of Shanks. I feel like I just assume we're all on the same page about this, but really haven't vocalized it. Let's talk about the strongest characters in One Piece.
Before there was time, before there was anything, there was nothing. And before there was nothing, there were monsters.
Spoilers for God Valley. Okay, take Emu and Joy Boy out of this, just assume they're the top dogs and unquantifiable. Now let's talk about the strongest men in the era of monsters. And considering the narrator said that this era belonged to rocks, I'd say he was number 1 at the time. Now I think anybody in this category gets into an Akainu versus Kuzan type scenario, a real fight to the death that does not go easily for anyone. But if it happens, Rocks D. Zebek will still be breathing by the end of it. Which means, of course, our second place spot has to go to King Harold. Rocks and Harold were like brothers, so they never fought to put each other down. But they fought, and it was glorious. The thing about Harold is that every encounter was an even clash with Rocks. From the moment they met to the day he was banned from Elbath, Rocks and Harold were both getting stronger at the pinnacle of this era. They might have honestly been equals. It's hard to tell because they never fought to kill. And just under Harold were 3 rabid dogs that stood poised to maul everyone for the next couple decades. Garp clashes even with Roger clashes even with Whitebeard, and they all fold Kaido and Big Mom like fresh laundry. But if you ask me, at God Valley I think Whitebeard looked more intimidating than Roger and Garp at the time, stopping Dami reversed Rocks with 1 arm and without his supreme grade weapon, destroying a mountain in their clash. Whereas Roger and Garp attacked him together, jumped this man, and not only does he block Garp's punch with his face, just ate it and casually stopped Garp from moving, but then he pressed Roger and starts overpowering him with Garp still pushing him. Then Rocks launches them both and sends them flying into the mountain. That makes Goatbeard the only one who never got sent flying by Rocks too. Just the facts, that's just what happened. I don't know what to tell you. Also, I'm not sure Roger and Garp actually beat Rocks here. Now hold on, stop. Just hear me out. I have a feeling this critical mass concept might be a red herring. Going back to Elbath, right? Gabon tells us that the key is refinement, precision with your hockey output. But what Roger and Garp are doing here feels like the opposite of that concept. I think rocks might start to regenerate next chapter, which is crazy, right? If I'm wrong, this video is gonna be so dated. But if I'm right, I think that opens the door for Whitebeard to come back, and for King Harold to appear at God Valley. And the Holy Knights gotta fight the Roger Pirates. I just really want another chapter of God Valley. But back to the point of the video. Whitebeard is most definitely him. And not for nothing, but Whitebeard technically got his title of the world's strongest man before Roger died. And Roger and Garp, there's something in common, and I think that it's their men. But I think all three of these guys are equal and not yet in their prime. Basically, if you replace Roger or Garp with Whitebeard in this fight, job still gets done. Which means I do think that Whitebeard, Roger, and Garp all go on to surpass how strong Rox was in this era by the time Roger became Pirate King. So I got this comment on my last video about the morality of the Marines through the lens of Fujitora and Kobe. And it's such an honest and media literate perspective on Garp. And I'm also genuinely glad that some people are picking up what I'm putting down. Garp is not purely evil, but he's also not a good guy, right? So I made this video to shout you out and yap about it. Also spoilers, I'm only gonna be talking about Marineford. So here's what he said. I don't even know what to think of Garp anymore. Back in the day, calling him a good guy was a no-brainer. The hero of the Marines, the man who stood for justice. But as One Piece keeps unfolding, that image keeps breaking apart. First, he let Ace die, and I tried to rationalize it, telling myself he was torn between his duty as a Marine and his love as a grandfather. Then we found out about God Valley, and I celebrated him as a hero again. But after seeing what really went down in Rock's flashback, it's hard to look at him the same way. Every time I try to defend him, he does something that makes it harder to believe in the version of Garp I grew up respecting. It's like Oda's telling us to let go of that idealized hero of the Marines image. Because the truth is, Garp is a self-made puppet for the world government. He's strong enough to reject, but chooses to be blind to the horrors and evil of his superiors. I think this is a very sincere and educated view on Garp, and to me, it's what Oda intended for his character. Garp is a cautionary tale, that sometimes good and even powerful men can still stand by and rationalize a tragedy. We are initially introduced to Garp as a kind and charismatic family member. Even if he happens to land on the opposite side of the Pirates versus Marines dichotomy, we can still tell that he's not a bad person individually. And those traits don't change, but we do. What happens is we learn more and more over time about the world of One Piece, that Garp's position in it naturally grows more and more indefensible. We as an audience become more knowledgeable about the true nature of the Marines and the world government as we see how they influence and rule the people of this world. We start to question, if we were in Garp's shoes, would we make the same decision that he did? And then Marineford happens, the Summit War. We as an audience know that Ace is a good person, and we know that Garp knows that too. But this is the first time we are actually forced to contend with where Garp has positioned himself in the greater ideological landscape. This character, who at this point feels like a family member himself, would be one of the largest barriers towards saving another family member from the crushing weight of the world government. It's very direct imagery that Garp is our last hurdle to saving Ace from the execution scaffold, that he places himself as a physical barrier between Ace and Luffy. But there's still a light on the horizon. Garp cannot bring himself to hurt his own grandson as he pursues the freedom of his other son. It's just too much for him to bear. The kind man that we knew shines through the pure white cape that imposes its version of justice on the world. And Garp lets Luffy take him down and free Ace for the moment. Garp will not help the Whitebeard pirates, but he cannot bring himself to directly murder his own son. Garp is, in more ways than one, trapped by his humanity, pulled apart between his morals and dogma. This is made even clearer in this arc by the example set by Whitebeard himself, a legendary pirate, a Yonko, the ultimate evil in Garp's own worldview, and his leading tenet is family. That everyone is born into this world free of sin, that you cannot punish a child for the crimes of their father, and that when all is said and done, Edward Newgate will go to hell and back, will fight and die to save Ace. Ostensibly one of the most vile men on the planet according to Garp's worldview, is making the decision that we, the audience, are begging Garp to. Now, spoilers for God Valley. This has been a central theme of Garp's character since Marineford, but there was still this idea that, hey, maybe Garp genuinely believes that the Marines and the world government do more good than bad. That pirates are still ultimately the most harmful thing out there. And we've just found out that this is not the case. That Garp knows about everything, all the way up to Emu himself. Garp is actually one of maybe 20 people on the planet that even knows that Emu exists. And not only did he choose to clock back in the next day, but he does not tell any of the Marines that he trusted, like Suru and Sengoku. He didn't tell Sword, who have no incentive to actually fight the government, as a legitimate mission statement. Kaido working with Cypherpole gets you a boxing match from hell with X-Drake. Literal demons running the government would definitely motivate this group to take action before this. He didn't even tell Dragon and the Revolutionary Army, who are already at the top of the world government's hit list. So this was just Garp either forgetting or deliberately keeping this information from the Revs. Garp's goal to protect the Marines is in his eyes an honorable one, and it's definitely well intentioned. But in reality, he's allowed the world government to amass more and more power, while using his name and reputation to recruit more bodies to their cause. He's allowed 12 more human hunts to take place after literally experiencing one himself. Garp did not know that God Valley was what it was, right? But somehow, he was aware of the Celestial Dragon's field trip. We don't know how he was leaked this information, but he was leaked this information. Which means every time the Celestial Dragons go on a field trip every 3 years, Garp has to be wondering, are they doing it again? And Garp doesn't have the power to stop this, right? Like, I'm not saying he's evil or orchestrating it. Well, to be honest, he is so strong that he probably could go and save thousands of people. But regardless, the larger point is about who you are as a person. Dragon is a person who could not bear the weight of being a Marine and knowing they were setting these up. Despite being far weaker than Garp at the time, he had to fight back. He needed to fight back. But Garp is a person who can compartmentalize it, to put his nose to the grindstone and just focus on the good Marines. Garp is not an evil person, but his inaction has undeniably contributed to more death and destruction. The point I'm trying to make, and the point Oda is making in God Valley, and the point Hannah Arendt was making in the 1960s is one and the same. The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil. Garp is not the villain of this story, but he is damn sure not the hero either. Oh my god, we were right about Garp the entire time. Spoilers for the new chapter of One Piece. First, credit where credit is due. This is an amazing moment for Garp. I mean, he saved Dragon. And it really does prove that even the staunchest Garp defenders actually do agree with all Marines are evil. They just don't understand it that well. Because even more so than last week when Garp decided to stay a Marine to protect the Grunts, now we're cheering and actually seeing some moral clarity from Garp in this moment, where he is directly not doing his job as a Marine, where he is freeing his son Dragon. So we can all finally agree that the issue is that Garp is complicit in an oppressive system, and that the best thing he can do is defy his orders as a Marine. And by giving us this scene, this proves more so than anything, not only was my interpretation of Garp correct, but it's also what Oda was trying to show us in God Valley, that up until Marineford, Garp had regressed as a person. He had grown more complacent, become more comfortable accepting his role as a loyal Marine. The truth of the God Valley incident fading more and more out of reach like a bad nightmare. Because this scene with Dragon is very obviously a parallel to the moment with Ace back at Impel Down. But where a younger Garp frees his son here, 40 years later, Garp cannot do the same for Ace. 40 years later, Garp chooses duty over family. 40 years later, Garp chooses to let his son die. Then at Marineford, he realizes he was wrong. His loyalty bears fruit. Akainu murders his son in front of him. The Marines have won. And in that moment, in front of Marines and pirates alike, Garp snaps and he almost attacks Akainu. Garp literally begs Sengoku to hold him down because in that moment, in his rage and in his grief, flashes of the man that chose to save Dragon years ago start to bubble up to the surface again. Flashes of the man that would make an enemy of the world to save his son. I have never been more confident in my theory that Garp will fight on the side of the pirates in the final war. And more so than that, I have never been this excited for a straight up conversation. For the moment where father and son come face to face in the wake of God Valley, and Garp and Dragon's ideologies clash and shatter between them. I hope Dragon tells him that he's going to become a pirate if he lets him go. That he's going to create the freedom fighters and set sail to actually help people. To do what Garp told him the Marines were supposed to do when he enlisted. Because to me, the difference between these two scenes is not as simple as Ace is his adopted son, or Ace is a current pirate and Dragon is a future pirate. The difference is Garp, and the person he is in between these two moments. That in his youth, Garp was a man that was more willing to break the rules to protect the people closest to him. That over time, that strength would be eroded in more ways than one. And here's the proof. Garp needed Ace to ask for help here. Garp could not make up his mind. I guarantee you that in this moment, Dragon will not ask to be freed. and that Garp will make that decision himself, showing us the man that Garp used to be and the man that he can be again. Maybe I'm overhyping it in my head, or maybe people are just not as excited as me to see like a dialectic argument between two characters where the most interesting thing is how they both view the world from their perspectives. I don't know, this might be the nerdiest shit ever, but I'm actually so excited for this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I am reviewing a chapter on the day that it drops, and fellas, it's a wild one. Spoilers for the best chapter of the year again. Again. Chapter 1165, Echo. Oda, I know you're itching to draw Law and Beppo again. Bring our boys back to Wano. The chapter begins right where we left off, in the midst of the greatest battle the world has never heard of. Rock swings the Conqueror's hockey-coated blade at these two legends, and just a single page in, and there is already so much to break down here. First, our official confirmation that Garp does in fact have the voice of all things, as he checks with Roger to see if he can also hear Rox's pleas for his own death. And almost more interesting, our first character to actually start to truly understand what Dami Reversi is the future pirate king, Roger. Roger catches Rox's sword with his own, opening him up for Garp, who rushes in and rips a hockey-coated punch that shatters Rox's nose. Or that's what you would think. Unfortunately, neither Roger or Garp were the world's strongest man, and even both of them at the same time are unable to hold back Rox, as we see Rox dig his heel in and stop Garp's punch with his face. At the same time, with just one hand, he starts to push Roger back too, and then Rox lets out this Conqueror's hockey roar and sends both of them flying back, crashing into the surrounding mountains. Funnily enough, this is something people headcanoned happening to Whitebeard last chapter. Okay, I'll stop glazing Whitebeard, but everything I said is true. For the second time ever in all of One Piece, Rox's hockey splits the sky by himself. The first time being Joy Boy's hockey nuke in Egghead. Next, we cut away to see Silver Axe stealing a ship on his own, saying nobody is gonna go back with Rox, as Shiki announces the official end of the Rox pirates. Then we see the Roger pirates and Garp's fleet calling both of them, and being told to leave the island on both ends, as Roger and Garp promise their subordinates the same thing: I'll make it back for sure. Two men facing off against arguably the strongest creature on the planet do not see death in their future. Roger says, well, all I wanted was to save Shaki, get some treasure, and dip. And Garp agrees with him, saying, I just came here to arrest you and Rox. Then Roger offers a truce to work together to take down Rox, and Garp begrudgingly accepts. Just then, Rox lunges at Garp, who narrowly vaults over him. Roger circles around him and sends a slash of Conqueror's hockey that lodges Rox further into the mountain. Then Garp grabs his ankle, saying, can't we undo this curse somehow? And he swings and launches Rox for Roger to try to cut him down, screaming, wake up, as these crackling bolts of Conqueror's hockey can be seen from the horizon. And at the bottom of the page, we see the Roger pirates escaping. They seem to clock that Rox's hockey is abnormal, and Gloriosa joins the Roger pirates. Then we cut to Kaido and Big Mom, as we see the beginning of the debt that she would hold over him in Wano. And Kaido honestly correctly points out, what are you talking about? I stole this from you fair and square. Remember, Big Mom stole the damn fruit from Ivankov. Does she also owe him a lifelong debt? And then we also see the start of Kaido's Darwinian beast pirates ideology here too, saying I'm gonna start a crew where brutality is the only law. Man, the more that we learn about him, the more I need to get this full Kaido flashback, because he seemingly chooses this might is right ideology here at God Valley, but then he's damn near Luffy-esque when he rescues King years later, only to become a colonial dictator by the time he reaches Wano. The psychology of Kaido is as fascinating as it is confusing. Now back at the fight, Rox continues to body Roger and Garp. Then we jump to an unharmed, unscarred Whitebeard post-mountain collapsing on top of him. A pirate calls out to him saying, yo, you're definitely the one who blew up that mountain, huh? The man is named Polo Graham, captain to one of the pirate groups that came with Rox from Hachinosu, and a big fan of Whitebeard. This man had a fan club when he was a first mate. If that ain't the fucking go. Then Polo offers to join forces and let Whitebeard leave the island on his ship, but he just waves him off. And in the next moment we see Stussy, Gonzui, and Gil Bastar, who's confirmed to have Perona's ghost fruit, as Stussy is searching for Whitebeard. And I do think that whether Stussy leaves this island with Whitebeard or not will give us a huge clue as to the true nature of Weevil's character and what he even is. And then we see the fucking GOAT, Monkey D. Dragon himself, threatening to kill the Marines unless they accept survivors from God Valley. And remember, Garp also told the Marines to rescue people earlier. The difference between Garp and Dragon continues to be a focal point of this flashback. A father and son who both want to save people here. But one filters the world through their own ideals, seeing things as black and white, pirates are evil, Marines are good. And in what is genuinely beautiful character writing, it turns Garp into this hypocrite who, despite all of his incredible strength, remains complicit to an oppressive system. When Garp says this, he does not realize the totality of the Marines. He does not realize that they won't listen to him. They will kill survivors despite his orders because the world government supersedes him. And then you have the son, Dragon, who views this world as a realist, who sees God Valley from the perspective of the people being hunted, who sees the world government from the perspective of the unaffiliated. He feels this very personal weight and guilt from taking part in creating God Valley as a Marine. And unlike Garp, Dragon can't shut his eyes to the people in this world who aren't allowed to be human. And so he threatens the Marines to do what they should have been doing in the first place, to save people. Then we cut to Rayleigh and Gabon returning to the island to help Roger. Now I think we all know this is why we haven't seen the other Holy Knights in a while. Rayleigh and Gabon are gonna cook them. Then we see Emu order Saturn from his own fucking mouth to erase the existence of God Valley. And to me, this is literally the scariest image we have seen of Emu in this story so far. It's just like uncanny. Under the overlay of historical narration, we see Rox, Roger, and Garp continue to fight and destroy the second mountain of God Valley. The narrator recounts. The records kept by G11 and CP6 concerning this top secret level S special mission on God Valley are sparse. The names of the participants of the human hunt were purged. Little is recorded regarding the site of the incident, God Valley. Information regarding the island's whereabouts, size, population were also purged. The number of casualties remains unknown to this day. And it looks like media literacy defeats the Marine defenders once again. Because Roger asks Garp, did you know that the world government had ties to that monster? It seems like an affront to your so-called justice. And Garp agrees with him. He says, I'm with you there. So Roger comes to the obvious conclusion, oh, you must be leaving the Marines, so why don't you join my crew? And Garp says, hell no. If I quit, who's going to protect the Marines? There was no secret plan. There was no grand revelation. Garp simply believes in the Marines, and he's willing to bury his head in the sand regarding his employers in order to do the good that he can. And this is the ideological difference between Garp and Dragon. Then we see Garp and Dragon game plan around why they aren't able to actually damage rocks. And Roger figures it out first. He says, it's all about the mass, Garp. Armament Hockey can normally counter Devil Fruit abilities. And I'm coding these attacks in Conqueror's Hockey. There's no way it's doing nothing. And Garp says it's because he's also using Conqueror's Hockey to guard himself, so it's not surprising that we cancel each other out. We have to overcome that threshold or we won't do any actual damage. And then they decide to put it all on the line. All of their combined Conqueror's Hockey in one attack, but they'll be left defenseless afterwards. And we're literally watching a tragedy play out on the page. Rox is full on sobbing at this point, and even Roger is wiping away tears as Garp tries to console him. Then the two legends prepare to launch their strongest moves on the world's most infamous pirate. And I'm calling it right now. Luffy and Zoro combo move in the final war. Roger and Garp launch a flurry of attacks, literally ripping Rox's body apart into pieces. Then the narrator closes the chapter with the following. The world government tried their best to bury this incident in the shadows. However, the disbanding of the chaotic crew led by Rox D. Zebek would leave an undeniable echo. The Rox pirates destabilized an entire era, and the tremors of their legacy would continue to shake the world. And me personally, I do think we'll get one more chapter of God Valley before we jump back to the night that Harold died. Spoilers for the new chapter of One Piece. So this guy said, instead of assuming Garp wants to protect his employees, you assume that he wants to protect his bosses. Be fucking for real. Okay. I think maybe the phrase I use when I say bury his head in the sand is not clear enough, or people are really wired to defend Garp every chapter and just misunderstanding what I'm saying. Since a lot of people seem to think that I was saying he would protect the world government, which is very silly. I was saying Garp is ignoring the true nature of Emu and the Gorosei and continuing to work for them because he wholeheartedly believes in the Marines, and that by doing this, he is keeping the world government in power. I think, obviously, Garp is saying he wants to protect the Marines from Emu. But we also have to look at the intent versus the effect, especially when we have like 40 years of context here. After God Valley, Garp spends the rest of his life raising sons and apprentices that ultimately decide that he was wrong. Dragon cannot bring himself to work for the Marines anymore and decides to fight against the world government. and Dragon doesn't even know there are demons. Kuzan faces a parallel decision to Garp when he loses the fleet admiral position to Akainu. He recognizes the Marines are going to grow more authoritarian under his leadership and decides he cannot work for them, that he can achieve justice outside of the bounds of the Navy. And Kuzan doesn't even know there are demons. The only person willing to inherit Garp's ideal of the Marines is Kobe, who was only ever brought into the Marines because he was saved by a pirate. And I think Kobe is on the verge of tearing the Marines away from the world government himself, along with Marines like Drake and Smoker. Like, this is Sword listening to Vegapunk's broadcast, and you see Prince saying that I feel like we're gonna get some hard to hear answers soon. I don't see any other explanation for that line that isn't Sword is realizing that the world government is behind everything, and that the Marines have been complicit. And maybe I think too highly of Kobe as a character, but I do not think that he would stay working for the world government if he knew what they were actually doing. That has been the crux of my criticism of Garp since Marineford, that he knows far too much and he's far too strong to still work for the world government. And as Garp stands ready to protect the Marines from Emu when he does finally take aim at them, which is not an ignoble cause. Here are all the things the Marines have done under the world government's orders. 12 more human hunts have happened. Thousands of pregnant women and children were killed that Garp knew were innocent. His son died. O'Hara was destroyed, Lelouch was erased. Arguably the only two people he could have recruited to fight the world government directly died, Roger and Whitebeard, and Marines killed both of them. There was a reason Roger assumed Garp would leave the Navy after finding out he was literally working for Satan. Because it's wild that he didn't. Garp is very well written, but the complexity of that writing comes from the understanding that he is making the wrong decision over and over again. Garp's decision to continue working for the world government is not hard to understand, but it is short-sighted, and it does far more harm than good. Garp is a cautionary tale about good men that let horrible things happen right in front of them. Just imagine if Garp joined the Revolutionary Army, if he fought alongside Dragon, if it was Garp training the next generation of Revs, if he brought the good Marines with him, if he told Kuzan or even Akainu about the Gorosei. Like, genuinely pause the video and think about it. Garp and the OG3 admirals fighting the world government. I just don't see how that's not the better option. Garp is a good person at heart, but because of his beliefs, he ties himself to an oppressive regime, and he lets them burn half the world down while he protects the half that he's allowed to. And something huge about the politics of One Piece that this flashback showed us, Garp is aware that it is very hard to join the world government. So these countries that are being eviscerated by them are not even choosing to be enemies of the world government. And the people that do decide who gets to be treated as humans are literally demons. Also, real question. Why did so many of the Marine defenders think that I was saying that Garp wants to protect Emu? Like, where did that come from? Did you guys actually think I was saying that, or are we just throwing shit out there and seeing what sticks? This guy is a Spider-Punk fan who thinks the Marines are the good guys. Like, you can't make this up. Please, Oda, make Garp a mole for the Revolutionary Army. You know what's crazy? He could literally do both. Garp could stay in the Marines and be the inside man for the revolutionaries, and nothing would change with his plan to protect the Marines. He would still be there to protect the grunts if their demon overseers decide to cannibalize their forces. And he would be helping the people who are directly fighting the world government. Really, the most damning proof about Garp's complacency is that he isn't doing this. He just straightforwardly believes in the Marines. By remaining a vice admiral, he creates this distance between himself and the Gorosei. But in doing so, he's also keeping himself out of the loop on the most crucial information that could actually help people. There is no secret plan, no insurgency group that he's building to take down the world government from the inside, nothing. Garp simply thinks that the good he can do will offset the continued brutality of the world government. He tells Kuzan, one of his most trusted confidants, that he's pissed his son created the Revolutionary Army. And the anime even expanded on this scene, and they made it look 10 times worse for Garp, which is wild. Because Kuzan is telling him that he doesn't know if the Marines are the good guys anymore after what he saw and what he did at O'Hara. And Garp literally cuts him off and starts screaming about Dragon being a revolutionary. Which means Garp, even after God Valley, which he knows made Dragon leave the Marines, and after O'Hara, which he knows pushed Dragon to create the Revolutionary Army, still thinks they're evil. Even Sword was not founded on the mission statement that they would take down the world government from the inside. They've actually only ever been used to confront the Yonko, since normal Marines aren't allowed to due to the risk and resources needed to engage. The only actual example of Sword fighting the world government was X-Drake calling an audible when he discovered that Cypherpole was working with Kaido. And that's because Drake is cold as fuck. All Garp does is distance himself from the Celestial Dragons by denying the Admiral promotion. And he's decided that by separating these two institutions in his head, he does not have to feel responsible for how the Marines are ultimately the main reason why the government stays in power in the first place. Honestly, you hit the nail on the head here. The better option to fight back would have been for Garp to rise in the ranks and take the Fleet Admiral position. This way his moral compass and leadership would influence the Marines more effectively. And he would be in the know about the world government's atrocities in real time. He could feed Dragon crucial information that lets the revolutionaries go and save people. Every 3 years, he could tell them when and where the next God Valley would be, meaning Garp could save millions of people from the inside. And even outside of that, is it not crazy that Garp let Sengoku become Fleet Admiral without telling him that he's serving literal demons? All the Marines he recruits in order to change the status quo like Kobe, why leave them in the dark about this? I mean, for all his faults, Akainu does genuinely believe in his absolute justice ideology. I'm pretty damn sure that if he finds out about the world government's true nature, he will not continue serving them. Garp could have turned Kuzan and Akainu into his most powerful allies in the fight against the world government and the corruption of the Marines. And with Garp, Sengoku, Akainu, and Kuzan on the same team, he definitely could have wrested the reins of the Navy from the world government decades ago. And I think we can all agree that splitting the Marines off from the world government is also the best way to protect them from Imu. And if we're being real, Dragon actively fighting to take down the world government is also fighting for the freedom of the Marines. It's a fight for the literal soul of the Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a theory. Let's talk about the Black Blades. So it's been coming up a bit, and I think that the creation of a Black Blade is still one of the biggest mysteries in the entire story of One Piece. I think I know how to do it. Despite being introduced to the concept with Mihawk all the way back in the Baratie, we still know next to nothing about how to actually make a Black Blade. It's hinted at that Haki is involved in the process, but we're really not sure how, or if that is all that's needed. One of the more interesting clues that we've been given was in Wano. During Zoro's fight with Yukimaru, he says Ryuma forged his Black Blade through a history of battle. And Zoro locks in immediately, saying, "You said forged." And I was wondering about that. Do you mean its black color came from blank? But the thought and fight gets interrupted. And then here we see Sukiyaki telling us that even Odin was not able to turn Enma into a Black Blade. To me, this is confirmation that just massive amounts of Haki cannot be the answer here, since Odin was already constantly fueling Enma with insane amounts of Haki himself. Sukiyaki also suggests that if Zoro is successful in creating a Black Blade, it will also increase in rank, turning Enma into a supreme grade blade. So how do we create one? Here's my theory. See, during the fight with Kaido, he calls out that Enma is radiating a strange Haki. And I want to be very clear that this is not Conqueror's Haki. Kaido is pretty much treated in this arc as the expert on Conquerors, and he literally clocks Zoro's Ashura form as a projection of Conqueror's Haki later in this same fight. So the Haki that's emanating from Enma before this is not Conquerors or armament, at least not entirely. It's something new that even Kaido doesn't recognize. Add to that the current arc in Elbaf where we're seeing the flourish of a new type of Haki in real time, and three of the strongest men in history clashing with no Black Blade to be found. I say that to say our current understanding of Haki itself is still growing. Now hold on to that thought, park it, and welcome me. An important tangent. There is a concept in One Piece called a cursed sword. These swords seem to have a will of their own and can even cause the death of a weak user. The ones that we're aware of are the Kitetsu series and Law's sword. We're told that it's almost like these swords are quite literally alive. And in the midst of all of this, I think the idea of the breath of all things from Alabasta will finally become relevant again, because breath equates to life. And in this fight with Daz Bones, Zoro was developing the concept of a living sword. And now let's go back to the rooftop at Wano, back to Kaido. Because eventually he does place what he thinks this strange Haki actually is. He thinks it's Odin, his presence or his aura in some translations. In the anime we take this one step further when we see that Kaido is shocked at the sight of Zoro preparing his attack. And in the next moment we see the face of Odin flash over Zoro's own. Now this could just be PTSD from Kaido, but I want to argue that it's deeper than that. That the strange Haki Enma is resonating is actually Odin's soul. If Zoan devil fruits can house their own wills, it doesn't seem so ridiculous that a great blade can do the same. Zoro even talks to Enma as if it were alive and conscious. And now a deep cut from Thriller Bark. I believe that this is the reason that Ryuma was the only zombie that could remember his past life. because he was wielding Shusui, a black blade, and it housed Ryuma's soul. So despite him fighting like Brook, he retained his original personality throughout his post-mortem service. And the last piece of the puzzle, I think the cursed swords are incomplete black blades, where the previous users were not strong enough to completely transform the blade itself. So the swords seem to be alive, but they never cross the threshold of becoming a legitimate black blade. I'll say it plainly. I believe a black blade is forged from a new type of haki that draws power from the user's soul. Either that or a still undiscovered form of armament haki that's rooted in that same concept. That it literally gives life to the sword itself. That we shouldn't be looking at the black blades as only extensions of the user, but that these swords are actually alive. And the black color isn't the same as armament haki from the wielder, but it's more like the sword is perpetually imbued with its own haki. By the way, the reason I do not think this involves Conqueror's haki is largely symbolic, because Conquerors need to be born with the potential of a supreme king. This is why characters like Rox, Roger, and Whitebeard were not able to create a black blade themselves. But armament, like swordsmanship, is available to anyone, rich or poor, kind or otherwise. As long as you are willing to dedicate your life to the blade, then this feat can be achieved. And it takes a swordsman of unbreakable spirit and mastery to even create one. That's why the only confirmed forgers of a black blade so far have been two men, the sword god Ryuma and the world's strongest swordsman, Dracul Mihawk. And when he does do this, I think the process of creating a black blade will look a lot like a scene that we've already witnessed from our resident King of Hell. And the sword in question will be the Wado Ichimonji, and allowing Zoro to symbolically achieve his dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman side by side with Kuina. Because like Rock said, promises are meant to be kept. Spoilers for Dressrosa and Egghead. And that's it. Got your ass. So this guy said, if Garp is a hypocrite and evil, then any other Marine, including Fujitora and Kobe, also are. I don't fundamentally disagree, but this logic must be applied to everyone in the organization. Well, yeah, it is. That's kind of the larger point here. That's what a lot of people are actually pushing back on. The idea that many of these people are not evil monsters, but are complicit in varying degrees to an oppressive and cruel system. A system that picks and chooses who is allowed to be human. See, I always argue for more nuance in this conversation. And part of that nuance is understanding that good intentions do not necessarily make you a good person. And to give my opinion on it, the best Marines are people like Dragon, who fight back when they learn the truth, or the undercover agents of Sword like Drake and Rosinante. And the former category is where I believe people like Fujitora, Smoker, and Kobe will align themselves by the end of this story, either by leaving the Marines entirely, or my personal theory is that they will go one step beyond Garp and actually split the Marines off from the world government into two independent entities. And to speak on just these two examples that you brought up, because they are, like most Marines, super interesting character studies, Fujitora is very much a hypocrite, and he is the first to point that out. His style of justice is one where he helps as much as he's allowed to. He protects people within the margins of the law, the loopholes. Fujitora, I would argue, is one of the kindest characters in the entire story, not even just within the Marines. He has one of my favorite, brief soliloquies in all of One Piece when he's asking what Luffy could possibly look like. A man so morally driven that he's blinded himself after seeing the horrors of the world, wishes for the first time since doing so that he could see the face of this kind savior, this hero of the people. And the beautiful irony in all of it is, that man is a pirate. Fujitora feels this immense shame from being unable to save the people of Dressrosa because Doflamingo is a warlord and technically operating with the blessing of the world government. But once he reveals the birdcage and throws the country into chaos, this vice admiral points out that there is no way that Doflamingo can remain a warlord now, and they have full authority to arrest him, but Fujitora refuses. And this scene is just phenomenal, man. Fuji says, haven't you been in the Navy for a long time? Are you telling me these cries of anger have fallen on deaf ears? Those aren't tears of sorrow, that's pure rage. Does the world government think itself to be God? Fujitora is acknowledging that the world government and by extension the Marines are hypocrites. To think that they can control the lives of these people, let Doflamingo brutalize this country, and then swoop in as the heroes when he's finally caught? These aren't tears of sorrow, that's pure rage. Fujitora is saying that the situation at Dressrosa is not one that the Marines have a right to solve. It's really like this beautiful fucking thesis on the overreach of authoritarian power without accountability. I mean, we want to talk about nuance. He tells Sabo that the Navy are not the heroes today, and he tells King Riku that he's placing his bet on Luffy. Fujitora will free slaves at Marijois, but only if the Revs are there to break them out in the first place. On his own, like with Dressrosa, Fujitora cannot and will not free these people himself. That is not a condemnation of Fujitora the man, that is the reality of being a Marine. Fujitora abolished the warlord system, but he was only allowed to do that because the Seraphim were ready to be deployed, and because two Reverie-affiliated nations had evidence to present against Doflamingo and Crocodile. He would not have been allowed to remove the warlords without this context. And we have to remember that Fujitora was drafted. He did not volunteer to join the Marines. Fujitora helps where he can, but as a Marine, he's not able to take that first step towards saving people unless it's co-signed by the world government. Fujitora is a man who's chained to the Marines. Now onto the example of Kobe. Kobe, I think, is our best example of a person who is individually very kind and honorable, but fully indoctrinated into aiding and abetting an authoritarian system. I personally see Kobe as one of the most incorruptible characters in the entire story. But what we're seeing is that a lack of information and effective propaganda can mitigate those values. Kobe doesn't know that there's corruption. I think if Garp told Kobe the truth about Imu and the world government, he would leave the Marines, or he would try to change the system from within. But because he doesn't know about it, he isn't doing that. Vegapunk's broadcast is the tipping point. The moment where the true evil in this world is revealed to so many, and unlike what they were told, that true evil is not the pirates. Pirates are not systematically erasing people because of their ethnicity. They're not disappearing islands. Pirates are not literally sinking the world and drowning millions of people. Once Kobe finds out the truth, I believe he will definitely switch sides and fight alongside the Straw Hats. I personally think all of Sword will either defect or try to take over Marine leadership in order to do this, in order to turn the Marines as an institution into something that represents more than just the blunt instrument of the world government, which is what they are today. So yes, while Kobe is complicit now, I believe that Kobe and Sword will have to evolve before the final war, and that they will end up on the right side of history when all is said and done. Kobe and Helmeppo are not destined to become the next Garp and Bogard. They're going to be better than them.
Oda told one of his editors that he wouldn't understand the significance of a certain chapter if he didn't know what the One Piece was. Chapter 1137, Shamrock's first appearance.
Yeah, so in Brogard's video, which was phenomenal by the way, he talked about this recurring motif of having two brothers that rival one another, or that find themselves on the opposing sides of a movement, and this idea of succession wars and a rightful claim to the throne.
I'm the eldest boy! I am the eldest boy!
But I want to talk about another way that I think this chapter could be relevant to the Void Century and the One Piece itself, and that is the Ancient Giants, and more specifically, Oars, a character we were introduced to all the way back in Thriller Bark, a character that history refers to, literally, as the devil. Now this chapter gives us a couple subtle lore drops regarding the blood of the Ancient Giants and the existence of different giant tribes. Oars is even referenced directly by name by Luffy here. And the last part before we get to my theory is that we have to talk about Harudene's dream. See, Harudene wants to be the king of the giants, not unlike Luffy's own ambition, and he wants to unite all the giant clans as one people. Now my theory is that Oars actually achieved this in the past 500 years ago. I think Oars was the king of the giants, and the title Continent Puller could have two meanings. It's a testament to his incredible physical strength, but I also think it's symbolic, that it's a reference to Oars being this king that brought together the different giant tribes in the past, keeping in mind that there would have been many more continents 5 centuries ago because the world is flooding, and remembering the significance of names like Pangaea Castle. And then we have to think about public perception and the censorship of the world government's opposition. The rewriting of history. Oars was literally called the devil, and it was said that he would conquer an island and then physically take it with him, that he created a nation of villains. But just like Elbaf, like Rocks, like Luffy himself, I believe this is all flipped, and the true nature of Oars and the Ancient Giants was a lot kinder than we were being led to believe. But what does this have to do with the One Piece and the Void Century, which would have been 400 years before even Oars' time? Essentially, why should this matter to us? Let me cook. I believe Oars was a great ally to the Sun God, as were all the Ancient Giants. I think they were followers of Joy Boy, and the King of the Giants wished to uphold his legacy. Look at Oars Jr. and his relationship with Ace. This tells us, 1, that the Ancient Giants are not what they seem, as Oars Jr. is one of the kindest and well-intentioned people that we've ever met in this story. But what else does this relationship remind you of? Emeth and Joy Boy. I believe Emeth is alive because within him is the soul of an ancient giant. I think Emeth is an ancestor of Oars. That's also why his body is modeled off of the ancient giants. The horns, the giant stature, the massive arms that seem capable of pulling continents themselves. Maybe Emeth was grievously injured and the ancient kingdom in Joy Boy had to build him a new body. And then his soul was placed into the Iron Golem to save his life. Whatever the case may be, Emeth was a steadfast ally to Joy Boy. And I think he passed this loyalty down to his descendants like Ors. Or an even crazier thought, Ors was active 500 years ago, but that would have been a fully grown Ors, and he's an ancient giant. And we have even seen normal giants like Jarl live to the age of 408. Maybe Ors was a child during the Void Century and actually met Joy Boy the man himself. And this bond and this legacy is destined to persist through the millennium, until the King of the Pirates and the King of the Giants will meet again, and fight side by side in the final war for the world itself. The Marineford arc released in 2010. That's a little over 15 years, and as humans, our memories ebb and flow like grains of sand dispersed by the crashing waves of time. And I think it's important to point this out because it feels like some of us have forgotten who the fuck this is. Yeah, you know I was gonna make this video. Spoilers for God Valley. Whitebeard blocked a Conqueror's Coded Slash from an amped demon Rox with his goddamn forearm. Straight hockey and tremors, and that's it. He even held his Naginata to the side because that's a collector's item. He didn't want to get a scratch on it. So of course, what does a man like Whitebeard do in this situation? Oh, how foolish of me. You block with one arm. So Rox has been Dami Reversi, and just like Broggy, he's grown to this insane size and gotten stronger too. Just look at how he towers over Roger and Garp. He's just about perfect Whitebeard height now. And remember, this is the Whitebeard who is not even in his prime yet. A Whitebeard who is not even a captain yet. A Whitebeard who we know canonically leaves this incident with absolutely no scars to speak of. Unlike many, the Whitebeard agenda is written on the goddamn page by Oda himself, and everyone needs to get with the program. It should be common knowledge that if you swap out Garp or Roger here and you tag in Whitebeard, job still gets done. And with more sauce, let's be real about it. I'll take it one step further. Because it seems to me that Whitebeard choosing not to use his weapon on Rox here might actually be because he doesn't want to hurt him. Especially when you remember how the Giants reacted on Elbaf and how the Rox Pirates are reacting here. These characters don't know what Dami Reversi is. They just think this is Rox. I've seen people argue ad nauseum that Kizaru was not trying when he fought Luffy because he wanted to save Vegapunk. So what do you think it means when the person that you are fighting is the person you want to save? And yes, my Whitebeard destroy God Valley theory inches ever closer by the minute. Witness me! Spoilers for Elbaf. So this guy said Shamrock being thrown aside by these mindless fans is hilarious. He is straight up a Shanks on steroids. Yeah, I really doubt he'll be as strong as Shanks. Like world building wise, characters in One Piece develop through intense fights and sheer force of will. But the Holy Knights represent the nepotistic elites in this story, and we've seen so far that they've been much weaker than we would have expected from an endgame antagonist group. Did I mention I hate Summers? Fuck that guy. And with examples like Gaban and Rayleigh clearly outclassing Summers, good, or Rox just outright destroying Garling. At this point, the Holy Knights have really heavily relied on their regeneration, which is pretty amazing character writing considering it's a power granted to them because of their position and privilege. That's not to say that they're not strong. I think killing Hammer is a pretty tremendous hurdle for most characters to overcome. But any of the monster trio cook that fraud. Honestly, put him in a ring with Frankie or Jinbei, I would love to see what happens. Now I do think Shamrock is going to be the strongest one though. Honestly, I think he'll be even stronger than Garling himself, but I just seriously doubt he matches up with Shanks. That he's somehow stronger than the guy who was constantly fighting the likes of Mihawk, clashing with Whitebeard, ripping divine departures like he's Roger himself. However, I think Shamrock's saving grace will be the Cerberus, and that thing will make him a legitimate problem. But the assumption that he'll just be a stronger Shanks with immortality and a demon dog, I think does not make that much sense in the context of this story. Okay, spoilers for everything. So let's talk about the voice of all things. And really, it's just what we do know about this very nebulous and mysterious facet of the One Piece power system. The reason we're curious is chapter 1164, where it seems like Garp and Rox have been confirmed to be new users of the voice. This comes after Rox used the voice of all things to beg Roger and Garp to put him down before he killed more innocent people at God Valley. So what is the voice of all things? As of right now, technically it just is. I think it makes sense if it were tied to hockey, maybe an advanced form of observation, but as far as what's been confirmed over the last 30 years of this story, we really know very little. So let's talk about it. Voice of all things seems to be an ability that you are born with. It's easily the rarest ability in all of One Piece, with only 10 semi-confirmed users so far, as we learned that Garp and Rox were both able to use the voice this week. We know this because the voice can, at times, operate like the Shine in Stephen King's The Shining, where two users of the voice can communicate telepathically. And this is what we saw with Rox, Garp, and Roger in chapter 1164. But because Rox can actually talk through the voice of all things, it does seem like he's a more advanced user than even Roger and Garp, because the voice of all things actually works in several different ways. We've seen users that are able to hear the voice of animals or creatures that wouldn't normally be able to communicate with humans. A huge example of this is Zunisha, the ancient elephant that walks across the seafloor. Zunisha was able to talk directly to Luffy and Momonosuke, but only Momonosuke was actually able to talk back and give the order for Zunisha to protect Zou from the Beast Pirates. This gives us one of the more interesting aspects of the voice of all things, that there are degrees of proficiency that seemingly cannot be trained, pointing to the power of fate in this story and the idea that some of these characters were meant to communicate with these relics of the Void Century and play a more specific role in this millennium-long conflict. Roger, Odin, and Momonosuke are shown to constantly be able to hear the voice of all things, which is how they overheard the Sea Kings. But like Luffy, Roger and Odin could not speak back, they could only listen. There are only two characters in this entire story that have been shown to be able to speak to things like the Sea Kings and Zunisha directly, the first being Momonosuke, and the second is Shirahoshi, as she is actually the ancient weapon Poseidon and able to control the Sea Kings themselves. This has not been confirmed by Oda to be an example of the voice of all things, so it's just my personal theory, but I do think this is the closest example to Momonosuke's experience in Zou. I also believe it's our strongest piece of evidence regarding the two sovereigns that the Sea King spoke of, and that by the end of this story, we'll see an actual conversation with Laboon happen as well. Now, the other uses of the voice are as follows. There's Roger, Odin, Emeth, and Joy Boy, and it's assumed that the Three-Eyed Tribe awakening is also tied to the voice of all things concept. And that brings me to the last thing we know about the voice. It can be used on inanimate objects also. This is connected to the Three-Eyed Tribe theory, but its most concrete example comes from the late Pirate King himself. See, Roger did need Odin to translate the poneglyphs during his voyage to Laugh Tale, but Rayleigh confirmed in Sabaody that Roger was also able to use the voice of all things to intuit the meaning of the poneglyphs themselves, and how important they would be in the grand scheme of the One Piece world. And lastly, it has also been theorized, and I think it's a really good theory, that Zoro's ability to hear the breath of all things is tied to the voice too. This is essentially a flow state where Zoro can hear the breathing of all living and inanimate objects around him, which is how Zoro was able to cut steel and defeat Daz Bones and Alabasta. And while we have literally not heard about this again in decades, I very much believe that Mihawk will also be able to hear the breath of all things. Spoilers for Egghead. Get out of here. So this guy's talking about the perceived power of the Gorosei and how strong they actually ended up by the end of the Egghead arc, after my video where I was talking about how strong I think Shamrock will be compared to Shanks. So I actually think the Gorosei came out of Egghead looking pretty good. They're not the strongest people in the story, but they're definitely up there. And thematically, that makes a lot of sense, right? You wouldn't expect the Gorosei to be in that GOAT tier because they're a group of characters who gave up on their own potential and chose to borrow the power of the literal devil instead. Men who are quite literally frozen in time, because at least that way they don't fear death. And any fight that is too challenging for them, they will just wait you out. The Gorosei never have to fight a Roger or a Whitebeard, they just hide from them until they die. The Gorosei are immortal, they never age, but they also never grow. And One Piece is a story about inherited will. The strongest people in this world will fight and die for what they believe in, and in doing so create legacies for others to follow them when they fall. If we look at the strongest people in this story, they're all people who chose to embrace their deaths and believe in the next generation. Roger's execution started the Great Pirate Era. Whitebeard's death started the New Age. Garp sacrificed himself for Kobe, who he sees as the future of the Marines, and Rock steels himself to fight Imu and the world government, a fight that he knows he's not ready for yet, but he is ready to face his own death if it means that Eris and Teach escape. And the last man in this top 5 who is still being woefully underrated in the power scaling conversation is King Harold. I think Harold's death will be a lot like the greats that came before and after him, and in his final moments we'll see him entrust the future of Elbaf to his sons Haradin and Loki. Oh yeah, we were talking about the Gorosei. Honestly, these dudes looked crazy strong, all things considered, but even then, I think one-on-one, any of the Yonko were mauling them. They just wouldn't have a way to finish the job. Even Luffy with Gear 5 wasn't actually able to damage the Elders on Egghead. They kinda got bailed out by Joy Boy's Haki saving them. I do wonder though who will actually end up killing these Orwellian demons. I feel like it's definitely still too early to tell, but that's also what makes it so fun to think about. Like I could definitely see Zoro taking down Nostro, or maybe even Momonosuke does it. Blackbeard taking out Garling honestly writes itself. And for some reason, I feel like Akainu might kill one too. I have no evidence for this one, I can't explain it, I just feel like it could happen, and it would be really fucking cool. Spoilers for Elbaf. Go, scroll away, get out of here. So this guy said, now we know that Shamrock isn't the one who snitched to the Gorosei because of the voice actor announcement. So two things on this. First one, I gotta say it. Kenjiro Suda is such a perfect casting, it's insane. This dude is probably my favorite Japanese voice actor behind just Takehita Koyasu, who voiced Dio and Toji. And looking back at the last big casting announcement, which was literally for Garling being voiced by fucking Madara, yeah, the Toei casting director might just be the GOAT. Also, Gorilla Grodd Kaido.
Barack Obama, it will almost be an honor to kill you.
Okay, now to the second thing. Does this mean that Shanks is confirmed to be the man who met with the Gorosei in episode 887? I think the answer is obviously no. This episode dropped in 2019, years before we get the reveal of Shamrock's existence in literally the current arc in the manga. Do we really think Oda would be dumb enough to tell them to use a different voice actor for this one specific Shanks scene where he is obviously acting the most out of character that he ever has in the history of One Piece? Logistically, he'd also have to go through the hoops of casting an entirely new actor for a single scene without giving them an actual reason. And this was one of the biggest fan theory moments in the entire story at the time. The evil Shanks stuff was fueling speculation from everyone for years, like agenda piece joke theories and real ass theories about evil Shanks. If Oda actually switched the voice actor, it would have been leaked and people would have guessed the reveal within milliseconds. Come on, fellas. Spoilers for Elbaf, so get out of here. Or don't. So if we assume this was Shamrock meeting with the Gorosei during the reverie, you know, because of the missing scar, the understandable reason that Shamrock will be walking around in a hooded cloak because this meeting is happening during the reverie. So Shamrock can't just walk around and be seen by any of the kings who might assume he's Shanks, a literal emperor. And the reaction from the Gorosei here, I believe, is all subversion for the audience because it applies to both Shamrock and Shanks. This is the reverie, given your standing, you should have nothing to do with politics, meaning you're a holy knight and a celestial dragon, so you wouldn't care about the politics of the lower realm kings, so why did you call this emergency meeting? Also, we know that the Holy Knights are sent out on classified missions to unaffiliated nations like Elbaf, so that could be why they're surprised he came all this way for the meeting, because he was supposed to be away on a mission somewhere else. And the biggest piece of evidence in my eyes for this is, honestly, I think Oda already confirmed this himself in Elbaf, because when we get the actual full reveal of Shamrock as a character, he appears in the same hooded cloak we saw him wear during the reverie. There's also no actual benefit to hiding himself at all in this moment. It's seemingly just for dramatic effect, and also so Oda can redraw the literal exact same panel from his meeting with the Gorosei here. At least to me, this is Oda all but saying, yeah, that was Shamrock at the reverie, not Shanks. So with that as our premise, who is the pirate that Shamrock would have called an emergency meeting with the Gorosei to talk about? I think there are 4 options that come to mind for me. The first option is, of course, Luffy, and Shamrock could have been informing them about the true nature of the Gum Gum fruit. We see the Gorosei directly after the reverie and their meeting with Shamrock, talking about the situation in Wano and the fact that Luffy's devil fruit was renamed to erase the name of the sun god Nika from history. They also say in this scene that they think that Nico Robin is already in custody. This tells us that they have not received a report from Guernica and CP0 yet because that information is not accurate, meaning the information prior had to have come from a different source, like Shamrock. The second option is Blackbeard. Now that we know that he's a member of the Davy clan and the Son of Rocks, this meeting might have been to inform the Gorosei of his true lineage. We know that Garling is narratively tied to the Davy clan through God Valley, so it makes sense that Shamrock could have been following up on the survivor of the Davy, and in his investigation found out about Blackbeard's true name. Keeping in mind that Blackbeard actually renamed his ship the Saber of Zebek after he became an emperor. So maybe Shamrock was sent on a mission to find out if there was any deeper connection there after Blackbeard does this. And then after the meeting at the reverie and the fall of Kaido's empire in Wano, we see Saturn confirm that the Gorosei do know about Blackbeard's Davy bloodline and that he's the son of Zebek. I think it works pretty well if this is new information they found out from Shamrock just before Saturn departs for Egghead. Now, option number 3, Shamrock is just talking about Shanks himself, and that he is finally on the move, meaning that he would be leaving Elbaf unprotected for their invasion. It could be the case that this emergency meeting was actually Shamrock insisting the Gorosei send him to raid Elbaf now that his Yonko brother is not there to protect them. Or it could be a warning that Shanks was finally pursuing the One Piece, as he would easily have the best chance of actually making it to Laugh Tale among all the current frontrunners. But my personal favorite is option 4. Loki. That the mysterious pirate that Shamrock is talking about is none other than Loki himself. We know that after Harold's death, Loki spent 8 years rampaging across the seas until he was stopped by Shanks. So he does classify as a pirate. And this would be our most direct connection to the current arc in Elbaf, as it would be Shamrock telling them that he wants to go and recruit the Cursed Prince, which we know was his objective when he and Gunko appeared in Elbaf. And if it was a holy knight that actually stole the legendary fruit of Elbaf's kings, it could be the case that they also know it requires a giant to fully optimize its power, just like Rox theorized during this flashback. Maybe this emergency meeting was called so Shamrock can tell the Gorosei that this is their best chance to recruit a giant with royal blood, that can then be used to awaken the true potential of Elbaf's legendary devil fruit for the world government. Especially if we run with the idea that the giants will be integral to whoever is going to win the final war. Silver Axe is baby Marco level now. Hold on. Marco should be 7 years old right now, so who the fuck is that? What does this mean? It means that in a story like One Piece, you have to pay attention to literally every detail on the page. Because what do you mean this was Marco's dad the whole time? 1, his name is Polo, hilarious. And 2, damn Oda, how do you throw a new piece of lore into literally every panel of this flashback, you monster? But not only that, I think we all know what this means. Whitebeard had a mountain dropped on his head, and he's back up in minutes. This thing cleared the radius of God Valley and fell into the sea. Whitebeard brushed it off. Haters were saying Whitebeard got one-tapped and sent flying. Whole time shit just fell on his traps and then he cleared it. He is not a human being, bro. That is insane. Whitebeard stocks continue to escape the stratosphere. And remember, Whitebeard doesn't know what Dami Reversi is. He is about to see Rox defeated with Roger and Garp standing over him. His captain, bloodied and beaten after being jumped by 2 of the strongest people on the planet. My goat will most definitely be destroying God Valley to save Rox. Rah! Witness me! I have a theory. I think Sengoku created Sword. Spoilers for literally the entire story. Listen, this may end up becoming true or be so incredibly wrong in like a month. So let's get some of the obvious stuff out of the way first. 1. Fuck Sengoku. 2. If you think Sengoku is too complicit to possibly have created Sword, just remember that he has the same moral perspective as Garp. Sengoku follows the orders of the world government and the laws of the Marines even when he disagrees with them, and he has shown his frustrations with obeying orders before. As we saw, this was his reaction to the gag order at the end of Marineford, when he was told to cover up the Impel Down prison break to protect the government's reputation in the eyes of the public. It was Sengoku that allowed Shanks to give Whitebeard and Ace a proper burial, and Sengoku even retired after Marineford in disgust. And 3, and this is important, Sword is not some rebel counterinsurgency group in the Marines, at least not yet. I do believe that they will eventually become this due to the influence of characters like Kobe and X Drake, but that is a process that is ongoing and 100% not the foundation or mission statement of this group currently. As it stands, Sword is just a Black Ops unit of the Marines that are given the leniency to sidestep bureaucratic red tape, so that they can do the work of the Marines without having to wait for official orders. X-Drake fighting Cypherpole and finding out that the world government was working with Kaido, ultimately leading to him teaming up with Luffy. Smoker meeting with Kuzan at the end of Punk Hazard, where he tells us that his goal in coming to the island was literally to meet with Smoker. Smoker, who we then see was in the New World during Vegapunk's broadcast, and he's bringing some sort of package back with him, which I think could be part of Kuzan's secret plan. And he's on his way to the G5 hospital to meet with Kobe, Tashigi, and X Drake, as they and the rest of Sword all listen to Vegapunk's broadcast together. And I think this is the moment in real time of Sword realizing that it's the world government behind everything. But that is just what I think. Until it happens, Sword fighting CP0 here was a one-off. It was X Drake calling an audible in the midst of an empire crumbling war. So Sword really should just be looked at as an off-the-books unit of the Marines. And that's why I think Sengoku started it. Lock in with me. As opposed to Garp, a person who would report that he literally let Luffy escape because he was his grandson. Sengoku is a lot more meticulous than that, a lot more cautious than that. And most importantly, Sengoku has done this before. Don Quixote Rocinante was recruited by Sengoku as a child and sent undercover within the Don Quixote crime family. But ultimately his cover was blown by Vergo, who Doflamingo had implanted within the Marines themselves, and he was summarily executed by his own brother. From this event, Sengoku learned two things that will become the foundation of Sword. First, when a Marine goes undercover, they cannot just pretend that that person was never enlisted. They learned their lesson from Corazon. They need to have that person publicly defect from the Marines. So that's what they did with X-Drake before implanting him within the Beast Pirates in Wano. Second, the communication and records for these undercover agents need to be kept confidential. But because these agents are out in the field, they'll be reporting in regularly too. So what does that mean? It means you need to create an actual unit designated specifically for these Marines. One that's strictly confidential, but can be cut loose at any time. That unit is Sword. Sengoku created Sword so that no undercover Marines would end up like Corazon ever again. And remember, Sengoku recruited X-Drake in the exact same way as he did Rocinante. Then we find out that X-Drake is operating undercover in the exact same way as Rocinante. And to me, it makes a lot more sense for Garp to be someone who's just aware of Sword's existence because of his friendship with Sengoku. So then he has Koby and Helmeppo both join Sword after their training, but Garp remains independent from the unit itself. And my final piece is that I think Kuzan is a Marine that represents the ideals that Sword operates under. And after saving him from Doflamingo, he even tells Smoker in this scene verbatim that he doesn't see the world government as the end-all be-all for his justice. And yet despite him training under Garp, it was Sengoku who nominates Kuzan for the Fleet Admiral position. Meaning technically, Sengoku is the only person in this entire story who's ever actually made an attempt at systemic change from within the Marines. Spoilers for Elbaf. Skedaddle. So this guy said, I don't know man, the whole reason that Shamrock went to Elbaf was for political reasons, by having other kingdoms affiliate themselves with the world government. Talking about Shanks and Shamrock and the meeting with the Gorosei. And listen, I'm picking up what you're putting down, right? But there's a deeper context that you're missing here. Because that's a different category of politics. Obviously, things like interventionist foreign policy and the colonization of countries like Elbaf are very political. But the scene in question doesn't say the Gorosei are confused that this person will be involved in any politics in general. This is the line we're talking about. This is the Reverie, and given your standing, you should have nothing to do with politics. The Gorosei are specifically questioning why this person would have any interest in the Reverie. As in Shamrock, you are a celestial dragon. You obviously wouldn't care about how these kings are governing their countries at all. So then why did you come to the Reverie? And I would argue that everything we're seeing in Elbaf and God Valley actually make it a lot more likely that the person in this scene was Shamrock. Because we are seeing that the Holy Knights are almost like conquistadors for the world government, that they are the ones that are taking action in unaffiliated countries. So for the supreme commander of those Holy Knights to give a fuck about the group of kings that they have on a leash doesn't really make any sense. And that's what the Gorosei are saying here. And just to be clear, holding the position of a Holy Knight is also inherently political. It is a position of incredible authority placed at the very top of a violently rigid caste system. But that's kind of my point. The Holy Knights are so far above the Reverie that it doesn't really concern them. They're gods. Why would they care about the legislation of an ant colony or the curfew in their aquarium? That's why the Gorosei are surprised that Shamrock would call this meeting in the first place. And then, following that logic, we find out that he's not there for the Reverie at all. Shamrock is here to talk about a specific pirate. Something about this pirate is so significant, or a new development is so pressing, that it's more important than the entire Reverie itself. And like I said in my last video on this would work in the context of Shanks or Shamrock. That's kind of why it's such a genius plot twist in the way that it's been written. We can't objectively say with full certainty that it was either of them. And I just personally don't think Shanks is evil, man. Listen, I have a pretty wild theory, and it's about Davy D. Jones. Spoilers for God Valley. Welcome me. So what was the promise made to Davy Jones, and what was the nature of his relationship with Emu during the Void Century? Well, first let's cover the basics. I think Davy Jones, the legendary pirate, was in fact very similar to the man we see pictured here. I think Davy Jones was a fishman. Now, Rox calls Emu the king of the bilge rats. Just like we learned in their first encounter in the Chamber of Flowers, Rox knows that there's history between Emu and Davy Jones. And from this scene we can gather that Rox sees Emu as a traitor, as scum, and that an ancient promise was made between them but never fulfilled. Now, what other ancient promise do we already know of in this story? That's right, Joy Boy's promise to the Fishmen. The promise that he would take the Fishmen people into the Great Ark Noah and bring them to see the sun. Now here's the theory. Joy Boy's promise to the Fishmen and Davy's promise to Emu are one and the same. I think Joy Boy, Emu, and Davy Jones were at one point allies, and the promise was that Emu and Joy Boy would help Davy bring his people, the Fishmen, to the surface, to finally live under the light of the sun. Maybe Pirate Island was prepared by Joy Boy for the Fishmen, and so the Davy's connection to this island with first Rocks and now Blackbeard, and the reveal that this was never actually meant to look like a pirate but actually a fish, it makes a lot of sense. And so this is the scene that we see on the mural in Elbaf. Emu using the Great Ark Noah to ferry the Fishman people as promised, until he didn't. Maybe it was jealousy, maybe it was greed, but Emu Narona betrays Davy Jones and Joy Boy, because Emu had his own designs on immortality, on Nefertari Lily, and on the world itself. So then Emu betrays and murders Joy Boy, deifies himself, and then uses his newfound powers on Davy Jones. This is Zunisha's crime, accidentally aiding Emu in the assassination of Joy Boy. The Fishmen are cast back down to the bottom of the sea along with Noah, and Davy Jones is corrupted, Dami Reversied, forced to kill his own crew and wander the seas for all eternity. By the hand of Emu himself, Davy Jones is broken and reshaped into the man known as Vanderdecken I. And from there on, the dread pirate Vanderdecken is only motivated by two causes. One, revenge against Emu, and by extension, the surface world. And two, the pursuit of the next reincarnation of Poseidon, someone that can drag his people back to the sun and fulfill the promise that was denied all those years ago. And even after generations, the reason's lost to time itself. Vanderdecken's dual ambition lives on through two successors. Vanderdecken the Creep endlessly pursues the next vessel of Poseidon, while Hody Jones attempts to take his vengeance for the Fishmen, to kill the world that denied them the sun.